This is The Express with Gary Allen, your 360-degree view of the world. Now, here's your host, Gary Allen.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this edition of The Express. This is Gary Allen here with you. I hear a little bit of an echo there, EW. Anyway, before we get into tonight's show, we got a great show for you tonight. A good friend of mine, Mr. Kevin Bowen, who is connected with the Indianapolis Colts. Tonight's show is going to be talking about everything dealing with the NFL, the Colts, and all the craziness that's going on within the NFL. Just want to thank everybody for taking a few minutes out of their day to join us tonight. Special hello to Randy out there. Hope everything is going well with you. And for those of you that want to get interested in finding out a little bit more about me and you want to get involved and let me know what you think of the show, you can always go to Facebook and Gary Allen. And you can also go to the website, or not the website, but the Facebook page connected with this show called The Express. You can go to Twitter at capital G, small a, The Express, as well as know me, meetgaryallen.com. And I want to thank you again all for joining us. And EW, before we go very far, and I know that Kevin is on the line, I know you want to talk a little bit about what we're doing here at the TMV Cafe as far as Christmas is concerned.
That's right. We do have the Santa Bag Drive going on. This is a fund that we're trying to put together with either getting, the supplies and or the, money to make it happen. And basically what we want to do is help change lives this year. There's people that are down and out on their luck trying to get, back and forth to work and so forth. So your help really can make a difference in someone's life. So just go to www.tmvcafe.com and you'll see the Santa Bag Drive there. You can either choose to do the basic one or go in and make any sizable donation. That's the other one. So if you want, 20 people want to give like $5, that's $100 that'll make a difference. So yes, definitely. Please help us out.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. And Kevin, I believe you are on the line, Mr. Kevin Bowen. Kevin covers the Indianapolis Colts, and he also produces their website. He covers the Colts for the last 4 years. And he also participates in other media things that go on with the Colts, television, radio, etc. So tonight we're going to be talking all things NFL as well as the Colts at the end of the program. Save the best for last. And that'll be all part of our discussion tonight. Kevin, welcome to the Express.
Thanks for having me, Gary. I appreciate it.
How's the weather up there in Indianapolis?
It's very fall-like, I would say that. It was a beautiful weekend, though. Temperatures really climbed back into the mid-60s on Sunday, and maybe the last chance to get on the golf course. But now I'm afraid that fall and winter are shortly around the corner. It's only a matter of time before there'll be some snow on the ground.
Well, I'm not going to tell you the temperature here today. Well, I am going to tell you. The temperature today here in Orlando was 85 degrees.
I will say this, when the NFL schedule came out back in April, probably the highlight for me on the schedule from a Colts standpoint was seeing road trips to Jacksonville and Miami to close out the season. So the last two road trips for the Colts will be in Jacksonville and in Miami. So at least I will get to hopefully taste a little bit of that weather here in the next month.
All right. Listen, you are a graduate of Indiana State University or Indiana University. I had a college professor at the U that was from Terre Haute that went to Indiana. Yeah. He was one of my journalism teachers. And I'll ask you the same question that I suppose my parents kind of asked me because they didn't understand journalism too much as far as, getting a degree in journalism and you're going to go on and work in a newspaper or a magazine. And that doesn't pay an awful lot compared to something else you could do, although I went into show business. Why sports journalism for you? I know for me, I love sports. And I also love to read. So what brought you into the journalism area of your life?
Yeah, I say I would definitely be of the similar thinking that you were. I just said I've always had a strong passion for sports. I can remember myself as an elementary age kid reading the sports page and even kind of looking into box scores and learning, kind of teaching myself math via like adding up box scores from like an NBA game. So, X amount of 3-pointers made or X amount of 2-point field goals made. And so yeah, I was just enthralled by the sports page and reading that on a daily basis before I went to school. And I can remember doing that really ever since I was very, very young. And that just kind of snowballed from there. And I was able to do some, very elementary-ish writing for our junior high newspaper when I was growing up, and that led into high school. And then Indiana University was just a great platform for me for multiple mediums, mainly newspaper writing, but radio and television as well. So, I was very, very fortunate to have some great opportunities there, and then that's transferred here into working for the Colts now for the last four years.
How did you ever dream in your wildest dreams? And I will tell you a story, something I haven't even mentioned to you yet. But did you ever dream in your wildest dreams that you would be working for your hometown, home state pro football team, the Indianapolis Colts?
No, definitely not. And it's something you just kind of pinch yourself every day. And, I'm very fortunate and very blessed and reminded about it. It's something that at times I think with, things can be so busy. And after a few years, occasionally I catch myself being like, don't take this for granted. There's people that would kill to have this job, let alone to have this job at the age of 26. So I'm very, very fortunate. And it's definitely a first-class organization. And from what they've done in the NFL for about the past decade and a half now, you can truly see kind of within working in the organization why they've been so successful.
Yeah, we're going to get into that a little bit later on when we start talking about some of the teams that don't seem to do well year after year, and I have a feeling it stems from the head of the snake right on down. For me, one of my dearest friends in the whole world, he's been on this show, and he's a friend that I speak to quite a bit. His name is Tim Robbie. I know the Robbie name means something to you as a sports fan for all of you out there. Mm-hmm. His father was the late Joe Robbie, the man who began the Miami Dolphins. And many of those Miami Dolphins that were part of the 17-0 team, of course, have been friends of mine for many, many years. But Tim and I go back a long, long way doing radio and television in South Florida together. And I have been a Colt fan since 1962 when they were back in Baltimore. And I had the pleasure, and I'm not going to get into how it happened, but I used to go to training camp every year with the Colts when they were going into Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and I actually was able to carry the water bucket for Johnny Unitas.
That is tremendous.
I mean, my heroes growing up weren't necessarily sports people. I know you're going to find that difficult to believe, but they weren't. Mine were musicians and artists and painters and stuff because I was always surrounded by sports athletes. But, I was very, very fortunate, like I said, to go to Carlisle and get to know Johnny Unitas, get to know John Mackey and Raymond Berry, and I got to know Mike Curtis, and I got to know all of the Baltimore Colts back in those days. And even though they moved to Indianapolis, I was still and will always be, as you and I have discussed in the past on the phone, I'm a Colt fan through thick and thin. And they're the first, 15 years that they were in Indianapolis, it was thin.
Yeah, it's one of the things where I've been very fortunate to where for the bulk of my lifetime, this town has kind of transformed itself into more of a football city. And, Peyton Manning obviously is the person to thank for that. And from a Lucas Oil Stadium standpoint and having a Super Bowl here in 2012, just growing up just north of Indianapolis and seeing how this city has grown, I think the Colts have been a major, major factor in that. And now, obviously Andrew Luck isn't healthy currently, but there looks to be another 10 to 15 years of this franchise having, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So I don't foresee that changing anytime soon.
Yeah, we're going to get into a little bit of that too. But Kevin, let's talk a little bit about everybody sees the team on the field. Everybody knows the team does. They have team meetings. They have practices. They get drafted. They sign free agents. And then they see the finished product on the field. You're behind the scenes. You work with a great broadcast team there in Indianapolis, and you work with a pretty darn good owner, although I wish sometimes he wouldn't get involved in things as much as he does and just stick to the administration aspect of the team. But talk about what it takes to put that team on the field and what it takes to get the visiting team all set up and you as a visiting team when you have to travel on the road. Because like I said, people see the finished product on the field. They don't understand necessarily what goes into putting that finished product on the field Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. Talk about some of the things that goes on behind the scenes that you are privy to that helps the Colts become the organization that they are, that we see on Sundays, Mondays, and Thursdays.
Yeah, it's a crazy operation. And it starts at training camp, really, when you have to pick up your entire operation. And for people that don't know out there, the Colts have their training camp in Anderson, Indiana, which is about 45 minutes northeast of Indianapolis at a Division III school up there called Anderson University. And so the Colts are really one of the few teams right now. It's been a trend in the NFL. More and more teams are staying at home for training camp. And the Colts are one of the rare teams that still want to get out there and take their operation on the road for upwards of 3 weeks. And I think it's something that the fans truly appreciate. Training camp practices are free, but I mean, it is a huge ordeal. We're literally taking your entire football side of your building and moving it up to facilities that are very nice, but nothing like you're used to back at your own facility. Whether that's, a dozen-man equipment staff, including interns, or, a dozen-man training staff, including interns as well. And then you have your scouts, and you have your public relations department, and your football operations department, the personnel guys, and IT department. It is amazing. And that isn't even taking the fact you got 90 players that you got to bring up there as well. So it really starts at training camp, and then once you cut down to 53 players, that to me is pretty amazing how you see these teams travel the road trips and sending semis ahead of all these equipment and all your different training tools you have to bring on, and how you have to make sure that all your coaches have all their attire ready. And you got to have, for a guy like Adam Vinatieri, a couple of Mondays ago down in Carolina, it was a monsoon, and he's got to bring all these extra cleats with them and extra spikes with them. And, it's one thing just to show up on game day and see it. And that, from a fan standpoint, I witness that every day with, other teams that I have strong passions for. But just seeing that operation and how smooth everyone makes it look, I think is something that's very rare. And again, it's something that should not be taken for granted, because it is a difficult operation to make things run as smoothly as possible, because you don't want your players stressing over that stuff. You don't want your coaches the night before a game thinking, oh, did I pack, my, breast cancer awareness pin that I got to wear on the sidelines? That you want them worried about what's the defense going to look like from the Houston Texans or Miami Dolphins tomorrow night. So yeah, there are a ton of people behind the scenes that make things run very smooth. And, it's not just the Colts. It's all these other NFL franchises and really sports franchises in general.
Yeah, it's not just the team on the field. It's the team from the front office right on down to the people that run the concession stands. And I know this much, that they've already begun, even though this season is only half over, they've already started. Some people in the organization with the Colts and the Dolphins and everybody else, they're already working on what's going to happen next year as far as hotel reservations here, there, because even though you'll travel to the three cities that are of the teams that are in your division, and you'll either be in New England or home against the Patriots, you got to make reservations, and I know you work with the front office in the NFL. There's a lot that goes into a game other than just what you see on the field. So, yeah, I know you as a broadcaster. I know Bob Leamy. I know he says that after the season, he's pretty much had it for about 3 or 4 months. He doesn't even want to open his mouth.
No, he's exactly right. And it's one of those things where, right now the Colts are sitting at 4-5, but you got to think about the playoffs as well. And you hear this week by week mantra in the NFL, and that's 100% true on the football side of things. But then you get on the marketing side of it, and you've got to constantly plan ahead. And I remember when the Colts made the AFC Championship game last year, you had to plan for Super Bowl activities. You had to plan for a potential Super Bowl parade. Yeah. These are just steps that you have to take, because if you're fortunate enough for all that stuff to happen, you want to make sure your plan is already in place and it can be as flawless as possible, because the turnaround is so quick. And nowadays in the NFL, if you're able to make a run in the playoffs to mid to late January, you turn around, the combine's the end of February, you turn around free agency early March, OTAs and the off-season programs start in mid to late April, the draft's in late April. Before you know it, it's training camp again. I think that's one of the reasons the NFL is so popular. It's a truly 12-month calendar, and there's so much anticipation even once that final gun sounds in Super Bowl.
Well, I know the one dream, and I told this to you the other day on the phone, that I'm hoping to do someday, I don't know when, is sit next to Bob Leamy and listen to him call a game. I don't want to I don't want to say a word. I don't want to talk about anything. But I just want to sit next to Bob, and I want to listen to him call a game and just have fun and watch the Colts play. And by the way, I was there in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship last year. You guys were in Cleveland that week to play the Browns. Right. And on the way home on the airplane, they kept giving me the scores, and I was getting very disappointed because that game was about a little too close for me.
Definitely.
But I love that stadium. It's a beautiful, beautiful stadium. And, of course, downtown Indianapolis, the people were so nice to us. But I got to tell you, Kev, 4:30 in the afternoon, it's darker than midnight. No, thank you. I couldn't wait to get home that weekend here in Florida. Sunshine, 80-some degrees. I loved it.
No, I understand. Once daylight savings time, it does get dark very, very early. I was actually up in Chicago this past weekend, and that's in the Central Time Zone, so It gets dark even an hour earlier up there. But like you said, with where Lucas Oil is located downtown, and then traveling to these other NFL stadiums throughout these past couple of years, I think Indianapolis is very fortunate to have not only Lucas Oil Stadium centrally located downtown, but also Bankers Life Fieldhouse where the Pacers play. And I think that's a big reason why Indianapolis has been able to hold the Super Bowl and hold it very successfully. They were blessed with terrific weather in 2012 for that Super Bowl, but everything is within walking distance, and that's something that not a lot of other cities have. I think, off the top of my head, I think Carolina Stadium was within walking distance from, the main part of downtown. I think that provides a great game day atmosphere for the Colts fans, and they've been fortunate this year with playing New England at home and Denver at home as well. So some great home environments.
I just want to get. By the way, do you know the trivia here? Who Bill Belichick started his career working for?
Yes, the Baltimore Colts. Got to be in the 70s, I would assume.
Yeah, $25 a week. He worked for Ted Marchibroda, analyzing film.
There you go. Yeah, that is.
Unbelievable, isn't it? Hey, what's the best advice you've gotten since you've been at Indianapolis? I mean, I know as a journalism student coming out of college, you're still green. You think you know a lot, but when you actually get into the real world, what's the best advice you got? Who gave it to you? And what advice do you give on to young students today? Because I'm sure you go back to Indiana and probably give a speech now and then about journalism. What's the best advice you got, and what's the best advice you give?
I would say the best advice that I got was from a prof I had my early sophomore year, and I was very hesitant to get involved with the school newspaper at IU, with the student radio as well, and even did some TV into my senior year. And this prof just pretty much told me, don't be afraid, and it sounds simple, don't be afraid to get involved in multiple mediums. Mm-hmm. And for a kid growing up like I did, all I did was read the newspaper, and I didn't really know too much about radio and TV, and, my high school didn't provide any of those type of mediums really. And so I was scared. I was nervous, and I think I was afraid to fail in those mediums. I felt comfortable with newspaper and with writing, but radio and TV was so foreign to me. And he was like, no, just give it a chance. Trust me, Mm-hmm. For a person that's passionate about sports, it's going to come natural to you. And I can't thank him enough for pushing me into that. I ended up doing 3 years of radio down at IU and co-hosting and producing a 1-hour sports talk show every Wednesday night. And it was the best decision of my life, and I can't thank myself for that because he's the one that pushed me into that. And I think it's so true in just kind of this age of medium that we're in today. Mm-hmm. Who would have thought, 20-some years ago, that you and I would be speaking right now in a radio type podcast. Right. Who would think that, people are doing Skype interviews or FaceTime interviews, and they're putting it on websites, and they're accompanying their newspaper stories with video and podcasts and, mm-hmm. Even photo galleries. So I think that's the biggest advice. And now with the Colts, it's something that I think has made me, has allowed me to keep this position and do it, relatively well. It's because I'm able to do radio for us, for 3 to 4 hours a week when you combine pregame shows and all that stuff and have an appearance on our weekly television show. So I think you want to make yourself as available as possible because you never know when at the last second, especially in the NFL. It's so much sudden change. You never know when you're going to be called upon to host this event or appear in this TV station or on this radio. So I think that, to me, would be probably the biggest advice that I receive, and that's something that I would try to, and I do try to tell young kids that are, inquiring minds, it's don't be afraid to get involved and never say no to how little of an opportunity that you get, because you never know what it can lead to. And when I started with the Colts, I'll say this was in 2010, and I was a junior in college, and I drove up every home game. It's about an hour, a little over an hour from Bloomington, where Indiana University is located, to Lucas Oil Stadium where the Colts play. And I drove up every Sunday and transcribed post-game quotes in the locker room. So, I mean, it was a very tedious job for those on the outside. It was, all you're doing is sticking a mic in there, and you're going up top of the press box after you're done, and you're typing up, 10 questions worth of quotes, and you send them to the PR person, and you go your merry way. But they were able to see, me work in that environment, and they asked me to come back for a training camp internship, and then slowly but surely it built into a full-time job after a couple of years. So looking back at it all, it's kind of a shock to me that that's how I got started. But thankfully I didn't turn down that opportunity, and it's turned into something that I couldn't be more happy to wake up and do on a daily basis.
Yeah, everybody that I've ever talked to that's been successful in one way or another, it didn't come overnight. It takes years in some cases, particularly in broadcasting. But it's don't let go of those little opportunities. You may not think it's anything, but don't let go of those little opportunities that will come your way. I mean, I remember when I did an internship at a radio station in Miami when I was at the U, and it was cleaning the reels, taking a razor blade and cleaning the tape off of reels when it was reel-to-reel stuff, or debunking the carts. I mean, it wasn't much, but it was an internship. But I learned so much from the people that were there. And then I got an opportunity to intern for Larry King at one of the top radio stations in Miami. And so I learned how to do interviews, and when it came to sports, it was natural. I mean, I grew up around athletes, so it was like natural for me to be able to ask the right questions of the right guys. And by the way, I know you're a big Notre Dame fan, and since I went to the U, we'll have to discuss things as we move down the line here in the next couple of weeks. Because my guys are laying bricks every Saturday. They are just doing something. Hey, you mentioned earlier about coming to Jacksonville and then Miami during the cold weather months up in Indianapolis. Who are your favorite teams other than, say, the Colts, or the favorite cities you like to go to when you're out there on the road?
I would say I really like Denver. Denver, I thought, was a great city. Actually went there twice last year. That's where we started the season, and then beat the Broncos in the divisional playoffs as well. So I love Denver Stadium a little bit outside the city, but I thought it was a tremendous city.
Yeah.
I thought Philadelphia had kind of a cool layout with their stadium seemed to be pretty much located in kind of a sports-themed park area.
Yeah, they're all down on the south. They're all down on the south side. Yeah.
Right. And I thought for a big city like Philadelphia, that obviously is so close to other states, I thought that was very interesting to see that despite their size, they're able to still pull that off. Foxborough is very unique to me. I thought that was interesting how, it's like 20 minutes north of Providence, 20 minutes south of Boston. And, it's kind of in a city that if there wasn't, the Patriots Stadium, you wonder, would it even just be a blip on the map? But that was kind of cool driving into that stadium every year, because obviously it's a very heated rivalry, and you kind of wind your way through a neighborhood, and all these people are out there tailgating, and there's no love lost because they know full well who that police escort is. And then I guess lastly, I love what Buffalo was this year. It kind of reminded me of a college tailgate. It's not the most glamorous looking thing when you drive in there, but let's talk about passionate fans. And it was great this year because it was Rex Ryan's season debut, and you could tell it was really a college atmosphere, I felt like, and it was awful weather, but these fans were still out there tailgating. So never been to Miami, so I'm anxious to see that.
Well, I grew up.
I would say.
if you're
some of my favorites.
How long are you going to be in Miami? Because I grew up down there, and I can turn you on to some things.
Yeah, we should. Typically, what we do is the itinerary kind of changes a little bit from week to week, but for the most part, I think I could speak for all NFL teams that don't have to fly too far. Most teams fly the Saturday before the game, and they get in kind of late afternoon, early evening for a 1:00 game. So that's typically what we do. I know for Atlanta here on Sunday, that's what we'll be doing as well. I know some teams that kind of fly, if they're going coast to coast, they might fly, especially West Coast to East Coast, they might fly a full day early, like late Friday, just so they get adjusted to that time slot. But for the most part, for really all of our trips this year, we've left the afternoon before the game and then fly back immediately after.
Right. Well, like I said, if you're going to go down to Miami and you get any time, let me know. There's a lot of great restaurants down there.
Definitely.
You're going to be in North Miami for that's where Sunlight Stadium is, or I still refer to it as Joe Robbie Stadium. I've been there more times than I care to remember in my lifetime. That's where the U plays. Although that may very well change. Compared to covering college sports, how much different is it for you to be in the NFL, and what's the difference? Because I've done high school football and I've done college football, and I know that the difference as far as the information officers are concerned, you get the information at the end of every quarter in college, where in high school you're kind of grabbing for stats and stuff, and they don't always give it around. And I know in the NFL it's different, but what's different from when you covered college sports to pro sports?
Yeah, well, I would say the first, I guess, relatively, and again, this is very relative compared to the beat I'm covering now, but it was the Indiana baseball team. That was my junior year down at IU, and the IU baseball team actually made it to the College World Series a couple years ago, and the year I covered it, they were, kind of middle-of-the-pack Big Ten team, and I was the only person that covered it on a game-by-game basis, and so after the game, you talk to the head coach for 10 minutes one-on-one, you get any player you want, and you feel like you have unbelievable access. And then the next year, my senior year, I covered the IU basketball team. And, as I'm sure you know, and, fans know, IU basketball is pretty much a religion in southern Indiana. And so from that aspect of it, your access was nowhere near what it was like for the baseball team because, the Bloomington papers are covering it, the Indianapolis Stars covering it, the local televisions in Indianapolis covering it. That was the year that they beat 3 top 5 teams and beat Kentucky. Kentucky was ranked number 1. And so it was a little more restricted. And so you had to do a little bit more digging and you were competing with, upwards of probably a dozen beat people to, make sure that something stood out about your work and that, you were a college paper, but you didn't have amateurish type of work.
Right.
And so I think that it was kind of a stepping stone. It was like, okay, you had all this access when you covered baseball. Now it's gone down a little bit with the basketball team. Baseball, you had all this access, and basketball a little bit less. And then all of a sudden you go to the NFL, and it's totally different. You have people that are covering from all around the nation and even the world. And for the Colts standpoint, ever since I started working there, it's been 3 straight 11-win seasons. So there's always national media around. And I will say one of the bigger differences is just, these guys are, grown men and they aren't afraid to voice their opinions. I think that might be a little bit different from what you saw in the college realm, where it's a little bit more restricted, a little bit more PR-ish. These kids, I think, realize, well, if I say something wrong, maybe they take away my scholarship or, coaches make me run sprints. Well, as we know in the NFL, these guys say pretty much whatever's on their mind. So I would say that's kind of the biggest difference is there's always a story in the NFL. There's plenty of different angles. And as crazy as it sounds, I mean, I'm able to produce out of season 1 to 2 pieces of written content for our website on a daily basis.
Yeah, you do.
Because the NFL, there's always something going on, whether maybe it's not with your team, but you got 53 players on the team and they all have, lifestyles away from football. And then from an NFL standpoint, you've got the LA talks and, there's so much stuff going on that there's never a shortage of content and people will consume it at a very, very high rate.
When I was working for the arena football team down here in Orlando, the Predators, a big difference in the game. Of course, I was dealing with a lot of players who had a shot in the NFL, and for one reason or another, they weren't there. But I learned, and this is my question to you, when things are going well, everybody wants to talk to the media. When things aren't going so well, the coaches have to talk, the quarterback has to talk. But are there players better? If you've won, great, I can go over and talk to them. But if they've lost or they've had a bad game, without mentioning any names, are there players that I think I better stay away from that guy today because it wasn't a good day for him, even though we won the game or we lost the game, and even though he had a good game? I mean, are there situations where you say to yourself, I got to stay away from these guys,
Yeah, definitely. And I think another thing is you got to be keen on your time management when you're in a post-game locker room. There's some guys that after you cover a team for a few games, okay, that guy waits till the very last moment to talk to the media. So don't waste your time standing by his locker while he's dressing. Right. Go around to the other side of the locker room, get a couple guys one-on-one, and you can always come back to that guy. So, yeah, there are guys that are go-to quotes on both sides of the ball and guys that are going to talk after wins and losses the same, and some guys that are going to be a little bit more open after wins. So I think that's a big thing. That's something you kind of learn as you go, and the longer you're on the beat, the better you know. And for me, what can be difficult is, when you're traveling, I'm the only media person that is literally traveling as soon as the game ends. Mm-hmm. Let's say on a road trip, there's 15 Indianapolis media people that are going to Atlanta on Sunday. Well, I'm the only person, me and our TV reporter, Steve Andrus, are the only two guys that are then getting on a flight as soon as the game ends after the locker room. The other TV reporters from the Indianapolis local media, the newspaper writers, the ESPN beat writer, they're spending the night in Atlanta. So they go back up at the press box, and they're able to work right away. Right. Whereas we're going, we're busing to the airport. We're trying to work on a plane. Wi-Fi can be spotty. You're kind of waiting on quote sheets from the PR staff from that visiting team to be sent to you. So that can be a little bit difficult and can be a time crunch. And you got to make sure, okay, Andrew Luck is the story of the day 90% of the time for the Colts. So Get his quotes, get that article up before that flight leaves. And then, when you're in the air, that's when you can work on some of the other stuff. So I think that's kind of stuff that, again, you learn as you go. And you kind of have to feel out. It's kind of a feeling out process, definitely early on in the year.
Right. I bet you I can name one guy that's probably great for press, whether you win, lose, or draw, a certain punter named Pat McAfee.
He is one of the best. And tonight he's actually doing a stand-up comedy show in Indianapolis. He did it earlier in the night. I'm not sure if you saw or fans know. He did a comedy show over the summer. It sold out as a theater up in Carmel, sold out 1,500 some tickets in an hour. I mean, it's incredible how popular he is, and I was fortunate enough to see it, and he's an unbelievable talent. And so when the Colts play the Steelers on Sunday Night Football here in 2 weeks, I believe they're going to have kind of a small segment from McAfee's comedy show from tonight. So yes, he's one that always draws a crowd around him, and honestly, for the most part, I don't think there's one player in that locker room that refuses to talk. I mean, I can't recall one time that you have pretty good vets in that locker room, and Frank Gore and Robert Mathis aren't the most talkative guys, but they give you pretty good sound bites, and from a TV standpoint, that's what you need. They love the short and sweet sound bites, and from a newspaper standpoint, they're very unique guys, and they offer good perspective. They don't say just the typical PR jargon. So I appreciate it because they do offer something unique, whether win or loss.
Well, I can tell you this much: if you're going to interview anybody that went to the U, we know what to do in front of a microphone.
The thing about it is, Andre Johnson and Frank Gore are two of probably the most quiet guys on the team. Yeah. And that's obviously those guys come from the U. So they aren't, I think, the typical U stereotype when the camera comes on. But I will say that Reggie Wayne, who obviously Miami fans know very well, and he was tremendous for the Colts in I want to say it was 13 some seasons here. He only talked on Fridays, but when he talked, he was absolutely tremendous. I mean, just great perspective. And again, he's not a boisterous guy. He's not a, he's not a very demonstrative wideout by any means when he did play, but he offered just tremendous insight, not only in, his own opinions, but I thought offered a great team perspective as well. So
I wish,
yeah, he's definitely one I miss.
I wish the Colts had offered him a coaching position. I really do, and keep him in the fold.
I think in talking to him over the summer, he's actually coming back to Indy here next Monday to do an event with Robert Mathis. But I think he really wanted to spend time with his family.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a message that, he talked about during the off season and he was very real and very honest. He's like, I forgot, being with my family this past off season, he forgot, how much time he was missing, how he was missing his son's tennis matches or, take him into camps or stuff like that, because they live in the Florida area as well. So I think that was kind of one of those things where, okay, let's do this for a couple of years. When those guys get to college or out of college, then you maybe get back into the NFL, because the NFL, from a coaching standpoint, is certainly a huge grind.
Let's switch gears here a little bit and talk about, there's so much still to cover here, the domestic violence issues that are going on with certain players in the NFL. I have my opinions, of course, and I know you do, and I'm sure players do. But Mr. Hardy down in Dallas has absolutely no business being in the NFL. And it's just my opinion. I don't think he belongs in the NFL. What do you get, without mentioning names, from players that you talk to with the Colts? How do they feel about this? And by the way, have you noticed that certain organizations are willing to take a chance on players? You take a look at the Patriots, the Colts and stuff. They look for a standard. A player with an upstanding background, and I know that goes through the vetting system before he's drafted or signed with the team. But how do the players feel about the domestic violence situations? I mean, nobody should ever be touched by anybody. I don't care who it is, man, woman, child, whatever. You never touch another human being.
Yeah, I think players are frankly fed up with it and are very, frustrated and disappointed that the Greg Hardy image often is kind of the stereotype that a lot of NFL players get from fans that don't want to look deeper than that. And the Greg Hardy gets national attention, and unfortunately, rightfully so, because it is such a serious issue. But, and you mentioned this a little bit. I mean, the Colts locker room has so many guys that do so much good for this community. And it's a shame that those guys aren't the headline on NFL Sunday Countdown on every Saturday or every Sunday, and I think that's what frustrates guys so much. It's because, there is such a negative stereotype associated with the NFL and their off the field issues. And when you break down the numbers, it's a very small percentage, but unfortunately, those are the ones that dominate the headlines, and those are the ones that the casual fan, that's all they really read about, and they don't read about McAfee going out in the community and doing this for, second helpings and, feeding the hunger, now that we're in the holiday season and stuff like that. So I think that's where the resentment of NFL players is. They're just disappointed and very, very frustrated that their positive light that they are shedding on local communities isn't being shown in the same magnitude that the Greg Hardy situation is, or, whatever else you want to talk about. So I think that's kind of the underlying theme on where the frustration level lies, because unfortunately, when this happens, often you're kind of grouped together in society, and all NFL players are lumped together, which I don't necessarily agree with, but unfortunately that's how it is from a lot of people that don't dig deeper than just what they read on the front page of USA Today.
I noticed certain teams like Dallas, they seem to take chances with players that other teams will not. And you take a look at the top quality teams with their front offices, like New England, Indianapolis, Green Bay, and you talk about some of the other teams, and even the Buffalo Bills. and some of Detroit, not Detroit so much, but you talk about the teams that are always constantly contending. And you know why they're contenders, because from the top down, they're a top-notch organization. I know Mr. Irsay had some problems about a year ago, and he's done his little time for doing what he did, and I know he apologized for it left and right. But if you take a look at those organizations I just mentioned, they don't have players spouting off like Dez over with Dallas, or with Hardy, or with some of these other people. Even the Cardinals out there with Bruce Arians, they don't spout off. They keep it within the club. Whatever's going on stays within the organization, and I think that's a credit to so many teams. And you look around and you wonder why Miami is constantly at the bottom, and you wonder why the New Orleans now has got problems, and the Rams have got some serious issues with their coaching staff as far as what they're telling their players to do and not to do. And I think it's a credit to owners like Jim Irsay and Robert Kraft who really keep a top-notch organization moving forward. With that said, let's do another gear here, because we're running a little bit behind here. How is the collective bargaining agreement hurt players? Because this year is crazy. You have more teams that are below 500 than you do above 500. We had one team finally eliminated from the unbeaten ranks last night, Cincinnati. New England almost had it happen to them this past weekend. There seems to be more injuries. I realize practices have been cut down. I realize that they're worried about concussions. I realize that practicing in pads, those days have been on a decline. They're only allowed to have so many days. Have you noticed that players and coaches complaining and saying it's not helping us win?
I would say it's more of kind of coaches in one group and players in the other group, because coaches grew up in the era where you were practicing, two-a-days were actually two-a-days back in training camp when either they played or when they started coaching, whereas the players, for the most part, unless you're true vets, you've kind of grown up in this newer CBA agreement to where the training camp practices are nowhere near as grueling as what they were back, some 10, 20 years ago, and go on further than that. So I think you kind of have to divide it up into two different groups, and it's twofold. And, if I was a head coach and I was thinking about, okay, do I ramp up the physicality at training camp when we get the chance to, or is that risking injury, or is not going hard enough risking even more injury? Once the live bullets start flying in the preseason or regular season. So I think it's a very fine line that coaches walk every day, because, yes, you want your players come week one to be at a, full throttle level and can make tackles in the open field, even though they haven't done it in probably 9 months. Right. But then at the same time, you don't want, your stud middle linebacker tearing an ACL or separating a shoulder in a meaningless training camp practice. So I think it's something that coaches in the CBA and the collective bargaining agreement, when it does come up a long time down the road, they are going to fight this to the death, because the players have more and more rights every year, it seems like, and there's no guaranteed contracts from the NFL. And so it's one of those things where I think it's going to be just a widely debated topic for a long, long time, because I think there's so many pros and cons to both sides of it, and it's just so difficult. And you saw that in 2011 during the lockout. It's so difficult to get both sides to agree on them.
Yeah. The NFL is thinking about moving two teams to not moving, but having two franchises in Los Angeles. I lived in L.A. for a number of years, and the teams that seem to be constantly talked about are the Jaguars, the Rams, or the Chargers. The Chargers moving up. The Raiders, I guess, are in as well in the argument. Here's a question for you on this, because they're also talking about putting a franchise in England. The Colts have never gone to England. Is it a question that the NFL will say to Irsay, hey, do you want to move? You want to play a game over in England, and he just declines it? Or is it just certain franchises that they pick on all the time to go to England? Because that is a arduous trip, to say the least.
Yeah. Well, it's a big ordeal for teams that are going over there and giving up a home game. And when you think about what that does then to your season ticket package,
right?
From a season ticket holder standpoint, if I have to give up a full regular season game, that's a lot to ask for and that trickles down to, sponsorships and stuff like that. So I would think the Colts are an attractive choice in the very near future, because when you think about it, you got Andrew Luck grew up in Europe for 9 years. You know, Bjorn Werner, a first-round pick from a couple of years ago, was born in Germany, lived there for his first 15 years of his life. So you don't get much more European-centric in the NFL from two relatively marquee players. Obviously, Andrew Luck's extremely marquee, and Bjorn Werner not as much, but still a name that would resonate over there. So I would think the Colts would be very marketable to be playing a game over there again in the near future. But again, from an owner standpoint and from a season ticket standpoint, that's a lot to give up for a committed fan base and a loyal fan base like Indianapolis sold out, upwards. I think it's well over 100 straight home games. As far as the LA thing, and again, you can probably speak to this better, Gary, because you lived out there, but to me, it's a head scratcher that the NFL thinks they could put two teams out there. I mean, can you truly support two franchises in a city that hasn't seen the NFL in, almost a generation?
Yeah, when I lived out there, the Raiders were there. The Chargers originally started in Los Angeles. And to tell you the truth, it's sort of like Miami. There's a lot of places to go spend your dollar, and NFL tickets are not cheap. Hot dogs and beers and parking are not cheap. Let's be perfectly honest. I don't know what they are at Lucas Stadium, which, by the way, is a beautiful stadium. I really loved it when I was there for the Big Ten championship. I wanted to pick up some oil while I was there anyway. But at any particular rate, I don't know what they're thinking. I could see one franchise move, maybe the Rams. They keep talking about the Rams, which, by the way, that's where they originally started. They were the L.A. Rams.
Stan Kroenke, their owner, seems very, very willing to move out there. So, for me, it's, let's send one team out there. Let's obviously get into that L.A. market and, see what happens. Let's go 5-10 years down the road, and if another franchise, if Jacksonville isn't panning out in Jacksonville in 5 or 10 years, and London it just isn't feasible to have a team over there, maybe you throw another one in LA. But I think for now, I think it's baby steps, and baby steps isn't the right term because moving an NFL franchise is anything but a baby step. But I think let's start with one team and then build on from there.
Have you ever gone through an NFL season where you see so many quarterbacks that were first-round draft picks that are stumbling and falling? Sam Bradford is having problems with Philadelphia as he did in the Rams. You've got Johnny Manziel, who I don't think he's ever going to pan out. I think Tim Tebow would have been a better choice there. And RG3, which I don't know why there was ever a debate between Andrew Luck or RG3, just between you and I, because I don't like these guys that run and scramble. The Colts had a guy that used to run and scramble many, many years ago. His name was Burt Jones, and his career ended very quickly because he separated his shoulder too many times. And talk about teams, as I said earlier, that are below 500. What is going on? Are we just not getting the quality players anymore? Is the coaching way off? What is it?
I think one thing that is contributing to the lack of quarterback development is kind of this new age in college football and high school and these spread offenses. I mean, how many times do you see quarterbacks in college outside of probably Stanford and Michigan that have their quarterback under center for, more than 20% of the snaps? I mean, it just doesn't happen at the collegiate level anymore. And that's why, people are so enamored with, or were so enamored with Andrew Luck. It was, wow, he comes from a pro-style system and he has all these intangibles. Yeah. And you don't have to, tailor your offensive system to him necessarily like you have to do with Marcus Mariota or, Robert Griffin III, guys that you almost need to adopt their entire college system for them to have somewhat of a smooth transition. So I just think it's going to take a period of adjustment in the NFL. And I think over time, you're going to see more of these spread systems, more of these Chip Kelly offenses becoming NFL offenses because that's where the college game is going. And if you want to have a smooth transition in the NFL, maybe you need to have that same style system to where a quarterback isn't all of a sudden learning an entirely different terminology from an offensive playbook standpoint once they get to the NFL. So I think it has a little bit to do with just how you aren't seeing as many true ground and pound. We're going to pro-style offense, I formation. We'll throw the ball when we need to, that type of style.
Right.
Instead, it's let's spread it out at the college level. Let's spread it out at the high school level. Let's get our athletes on the field. And let's look to the sideline where there's the giant poster boards, and we're going to throw in the signals, and guys are going to be able to not think much and just be able to go. So I think that is kind of something that's really hindering quarterback development at a young level. I do think there are some promising quarterbacks. I think Derek Carr out in Oakland has shown some flashes. Even the kids in the AFC South, I think Marcus Mariota and Blake Bortles in Jacksonville have shown a little bit, but it would be nice to have, a couple other guys that can kind of join Andrew Luck and, possibly Russell Wilson as well. It's kind of and Cam Newton should be thrown in there definitely. It's kind of the up-and-coming quarterbacks in the NFL.
All right, let's talk about everything Indianapolis Colts. I just read an article here that says Texas A&M is suing the Colts over the use of the 12th man. and let's get through this one quickly because I want to get to Nick Saban, maybe the next head coach of the Indianapolis Colts.
Well, as far as the 12th man, I would be hard-pressed to find NFL franchises, college programs that don't use 12th man in some magnitude. I mean, on your feet, 12th man, flash it up on the Jumbotron. I mean, Texas A&M, I understand you have these traditions and everything, but I mean, come on. I mean, it seems pretty harmless to me, but again, when you give them the legalities of it all, sometimes the fine print wins out. So that'll be interesting. Just add that as another bit of adversity the Colts have had to deal with here in 2015.
And they've had to deal with quite a bit. Now, the end of the season last year was not good for us Colt fans. We got ourselves handed to us by the New England Patriots in the AFC Championship game. During the offseason, the Colts signed a lot of prime meat, as I like to refer to it, Frank Gore, Andre Johnson, and others, offensive linemen, defensive linemen. They went into the draft, and yes, they got a guy out of Miami, Mr. Dorsett, who's on IR now, I guess. But
he should be back in a couple of weeks.
When, in the name of God, did Grigson ever forget about the offensive line? I mean, you know, the one thing Peyton Manning went through a 4-year drop, and the Colts as a team did when Peyton was in his 4th year. What did Grigson think was going to happen? Miraculously, these guys out of nowhere were going to start to get better. I mean, Frank Gore needs an O-line in front of him to open up the holes. We can see that he can still run. I mean, I'm sorry, but I don't like any of the guys that play on the O-line. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, the Colts definitely have invested a lot of their top-end picks, like you said, and some skill guys. And the T.Y. Hiltons of the world have panned out. And those interior guys, I think, are the guys that have really it's taken a while for a guy like Hugh Thornton, a 3rd-round pick from a couple of years ago, to develop now into a starter. I do think the O-line has played better in recent weeks. If you look at Gore's numbers, he's putting up really 1,000-yard season, and the Colts haven't had a 1,000-yard rusher since 2007, which is pretty incredible. So Gore's on pace for that. But I think the O-line, that's going to be, I think, a big key here in the second half of the season is, okay, you were better, they kind of made these wholesale changes on the offensive line back in week 3. The Colts took their starting right tackle, moved him to left guard, benched their right guard, and to kind of plug and play with what pretty much the line they used in the playoffs last year when Andrew Luck was sacked just twice in about 150 pass attempts. So I think now it's, okay, we've got this line settled in. The offense is coming off, their best performance of the season against Denver, who is the league's top-ranked defense. I think that's going to be the key now in the second half is with Matt Hasselbeck's quarterback for the next couple of weeks, it's can you keep him upright? And credit to Matt, when he started twice earlier this year, he does a tremendous job of getting the ball out very quick. And he's a guy that knows his strengths. He knows he can't keep plays alive like Andrew Luck. He knows that he can't absorb hits like Andrew Luck. And so I think he realizes, I got to get it out quick, find the playmakers, live to see another down. And I think that's something that the Colts fight with Andrew Luck every day. It's one of his greatest assets, just how tough of a competitor he is and kind of his never say die attitude when it comes to plays. And there's been so many plays that he's kept alive, borderline, from a miraculous standpoint. But then at the same time, it's can he continue to absorb these hits? And it's caught up with him, now that he's lacerated kidney and abdominal muscle as well. So the O-line is going to be a huge part of the second half of the season if the Colts want to have kind of any hope, I think, of getting on the run in January.
Here's my question, and Chizinski is a UM guy. Chuck Pagano was a UM guy. There are rumors that a certain head coach that coaches the Crimson Tide is on Jim Irsay's radar screen. I've got a couple of articles in front of me here. You and I talked about it briefly, and you said, well, I hear little rumors of it, but now you're hearing more and more of it. And a friend of mine who I shall not name at ESPN says that that Nick Saban is very interested in coaching the Indianapolis Colts because the reason he left the Miami Dolphins, he didn't have a quarterback, and the quarterback they did select he didn't like. But here's my question. Is Pagano gone? If he is gone and they bring in Nick Saban, he's going to want to control everything. And what does that do to Grigson, who, by the way, I'm not a big fan of Grigson. There's something about the guy I'm just not a big fan of. His draft picks, some of them have not really panned out very well. We should be a dominating football team, Andrew Luck or not. And by the way, I'm really not too happy with Tim Hasselbeck saying his brother's too old to be quarterback. But, I mean, what's happening up there? What are the fans talking about? We've got a few minutes left. I want you to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, the fans are definitely that is the hot button topic. It's if there's no run in January, who's going to go? Should both go? Should one go? Which one should it be if it's only one? And I think that's something that there's so much unknown with this season because you came in with these extreme expectations, and then the reports surfaced that Chuck Pagano and Ryan Grigson aren't seeing eye to eye, and then the losing started out of the gate, and then Andrew Luck gets injured, and now it's, well, if the Colts can salvage their season without Andrew Luck for almost half of it, do both of them keep their jobs? So I think a lot of it is going to be dependent on what happens here in the second half of the season. Now that Rob Chizinski is the offensive coordinator, can the offense now start playing better? Was that kind of the only thing that was needed? Was that kind of the trigger point? Because, the Colts looked on Sunday against Denver a few weeks back like the team I think everybody thought they would be in 2015. Is that team here to stay? I think that is the greatest question down the stretch. And then when you get in the offseason, if there is a change that is made and you have Andrew Luck here for the next foreseeable future, 10, 15 years, why wouldn't every coach and every potential general manager, if both those openings occur, why wouldn't they be knocking down the door to want to walk into that environment? We talked about it earlier, Gary. Finding a quarterback in this league is such a challenge. And the old saying of if you have a quarterback, you have a chance. Well, who wouldn't want to walk into the situation with Andrew Luck for the next 10 to 15 years? So there's 7 weeks left in the regular season, and there is so much time, I think, and so many questions that are left unanswered for this Colts team.
Yeah, and there is. Bob Kravitz, by the way, was the one that released the little thing, one of your buddies up there in Indianapolis. One last quick question for you. You've been with the Colts for 4 years. What has the time with the Colts taught you, and what have you learned about yourself that you can carry on in your profession that's made you a better journalist than you were when you walked in the front door?
I would say preparation is the key to everything, and preparing for the unknown. And I go back to my first year with the Colts was 2012. Chuck Pagano gets diagnosed with leukemia during the team's bye week. And I mean, of all the storylines, of all the things I thought of when I joined an NFL franchise, that was the last thing, I expected to have happen. The head coach, having cancer and being gone for, 2 or 3 months. I mean, it's one of those things where if you have downtime, make sure you're working ahead because you never know when something sudden is going to happen and you wish you had that time back. So I think that is the biggest thing in the NFL. And as a journalist, it's okay. On a much lesser degree, if you see somebody get injured during a game, prepare that guy might be out for X amount of time and do research on, okay, who are his backups? Is he an injury played? Little stuff like that to be okay. When the time arises that the team announces the player X is out for, 6 weeks, make sure that the fans don't have to go searching for, okay, Andrew Luck's gone. Who's Matt Hasselbeck? How many games has he played in? What has he done in his career? When's the last time he's thrown a pass? All that stuff. Yeah. So I think preparing for the unknown, and I know at times it can be tough and you never know, but this season has definitely taught me that you never know what's coming around the corner. And I think that's a major reason why the NFL is so popular, because there's just so much parity throughout the league. Who would have ever thought Houston would have gone to Cincinnati last night and beat them?
Yeah.
There's just so much parity around the league, and that's why it's the most popular sport in America by far.
Kevin, I want to thank you so much for taking an hour out of your day to join us here. I'm going to call you in just a couple of minutes, but Kevin Bowen has been my guest. He covers the Indianapolis Colts. He also produces their website. He's one of their top-notch reporters. He's been with the team for 4 years. Kevin, thank you so much for taking a time out of your day to be with us, and hopefully you're going to be back with us before too long. I would have asked you for your Super Bowl predictions, but I think yours are pretty much the same as mine. They're in the toilet at this particular point in time in life. I mean, they definitely.
I would agree with that.
Definitely. Anyway, I just want to thank everybody out there for tuning in to The Express. Thank you so much for sharing my time with you and your time with me. And until next time that we meet, please take care of yourselves.
This is The Express with Gary. You've been listening to The Express with Gary Allen. Join us here every Tuesday night at 10 for more captivating talk with Gary Allen. See you next time on The Express.